in San Francisco with Jimmy Garoppolo being out for the season with a broken foot. So, Pete, this offense has a plethora of weapons. When you talk about the wide receivers, the tight end, and obviously the running back, they have a great offensive line. It's a great team overall, and they are certainly Super Bowl contenders. Brock Purdy stepped in place of Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he going to be the answer, or is there maybe a quarterback on waivers that they might be looking to explore that could help solve the situation for them?
You know, Brock Purdy played well on Sunday. And again, in this offense, Kyle Shanahan does a great job of making it easy on the quarterback. So whoever plays quarterback, it's going to be easier on him in this system than it might be, particularly with all those weapons, than it might be in another system. So I was impressed with what I saw from Brock Purdy. I haven't watched the tape yet, but 2 touchdown passes, seemed confident, seemed one of those guys that's getting the ball out on time and in rhythm, which you have to do in that offense. So I like what I saw from him. But as far as Baker Mayfield, I mean, if he's available, here's the other thing. There are teams ahead of them in the waiver claim, so it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to land him, but I'm sure they will give it strong consideration. The question is this, though. How much of a difference is there between Baker Mayfield and Brock Purdy? Do the 49ers believe there's a lot of distance? Because if they do, then they'll claim him. If they don't, and they know better than anybody because they've seen him practice all year long, then I think they make a pass. But what if somebody claimed him ahead of him, Jamie, and then they can't claim him just to spite them a little bit?
That might be the case with the Rams being ahead of them on the waiver party. We'll get back to Baker Mayfield in a second. I want to stay with the 49ers for a minute here, Heath. So first, let's start with 2 quarterback superflex leagues. What's your interest in Brock Purdy?
He's still at the bottom of the pile. This week we have 6 quarterbacks on a bye, so we really only have 26 quarterbacks playing. You might have to start Brock Purdy this week.
I know you had Jimmy Garoppolo in one of those leagues. Is this going to be a guy you're targeting?
It would be, except I spent 100% of my fab on Jimmy Garoppolo. I will definitely put in a claim for Brock Purdy for sure.
All right, so now in terms of the rest of the 49ers, what's your panic level? Because McCaffrey still had a great game against the Dolphins. He was usage up a little bit because of the Elijah Mitchell injury. But in terms of the receiving core, Deebo Samuel playing through the quad injury, Brandon Ayuk, you see the numbers here, George Kittle, another disappointing day. Your assessment of them moving forward without Garoppolo?
Yeah, I think you're looking at a bump for Christian McCaffrey, actually. Everybody else is in trouble. It was already too many mouths to feed in this offense. Now it's too many mouths to feed with a quarterback that's probably going to be 20% less efficient than Jimmy Garoppolo was. Anybody that needs to go downfield looks like they're in trouble with Brock Purdy because he was dump. I think we'll get a lot of short area passes. You're still going to start George Kittle because he's a tight end and he has the possibility to score 2 touchdowns any week. Ayuk and Deebo Samuel will be low-end, boomer bust number 3 wide receivers.
Low-end? Wow, okay, so there's really taking a tumble.
Not this week with 16 on a bye, but after
Sure,
that, yes.
No, I get it, but really taking a tumble for those guys. So unfortunate situation for them again, unless they decide to make a change at the quarterback position aside from Brock Purdy, and Pete sort of alluded to this. So Pete, the Panthers moving on from Baker Mayfield, they're going to go with Sam Darnold. We'll start there in terms of the rest of the Panthers situation. Sam Darnold do enough in the game 2 weeks ago to sort of solidify himself as the guy for the rest of the season for the Panthers, just to see if maybe he's an option for them next year.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sam Darnold played well for him. I mean, he's not the long-term answer either. They know that. So, no, I don't think he's the long-term answer. But Baker Mayfield was terrible in Carolina. I mean, he was awful. And when you look at this team and how they got to be built, they have to find themselves a quarterback. They can't continue with this, I'll go get him type of situation. Now, they wanted Deshaun Watson. After Sunday, maybe they're going to be relieved that they didn't get him because he was terrible on Sunday. But no, none of these guys are the answer for Carolina. They're going to have to draft one and develop one, but he played better than Baker Mayfield, which is progress in that building.
All right, so go back to what we were talking about before. So if Baker Mayfield becomes available to the 49ers, you don't think they're going to take a hard look at him, or you do think that maybe this is something they should explore? They did bring in Josh Johnson for the 4th time, by the way, on their roster, so a guy that they also know fairly well to help solve the situation there.
Should they? Absolutely, they should. I mean, I don't bring him in to be the starter right away. I'd like to bring him in and as a safety net in case Brock Purdy's terrible the next time out. Remember, a lot of these quarterbacks, they get in there as backup situations, and teams have no idea what they can and can't do. Once they get a little tape on you, which they do now have, then all of a sudden you're a different quarterback. So, yeah, from that standpoint, if I'm the 49ers, I would claim Baker Mayfield, but I wouldn't make him the starter. I'd let Purdy start. If he plays himself out of the job, then Baker Mayfield goes in and becomes the quarterback.
Okay, so you just said, Heath, that they're low-end number 3 guys in terms of Deebo and Ayuk. Does that change if it's Baker Mayfield?
It would give me a little more hope for their upside because we've seen Baker Mayfield in the past play a lot better. Like, he deserves to get cut. He deserved to get benched. He's been awful this year. But this is the worst season of his career as a passer in 5 years in the NFL. It's possible he goes and spends a month with Kyle Shanahan, goes through the car wash. We've seen Kyle Shanahan make bad passers look pretty efficient at times. He could give them a little boost. The floor would stay the same, awful, but they would give him a little bit more upside.
To be fair to Baker, yes, he's never played with an offensive line and skill position group and coach like this, so hopefully all those things working together for him might help. And I like the phrase, the car wash. That would certainly be a good situation for Baker because he probably needs it after the stink that he had in Carolina. All right, in the same game for the 49ers, the Dolphins quarterback was pretty stinky, Tagovailoa, and then he left the game late with an ankle injury. Pete, just in terms of, thankfully Tua's going to be fine, so he's going to play in the game in Week 14 against the Chargers. But just without Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson, the 2 tackles there, how bad did that Dolphins offense look to you?
Well, the offense looked bad, and the offensive line wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. He was off. He just didn't look right. He was missing passes. There were guys open. He was overshooting them and underthrowing balls. It just didn't look like he was in any sort of rhythm. In fairness to him, you're playing without your tackles. In fairness to him, you're playing a really good defense. And so he just had one of those days. It wasn't awful. It wasn't something you say, okay, Tua's back to being Tua, but he wasn't good. And this was a moment for him to be really good, and he wasn't really good, and that's the disappointing part of it, because these next 3 games are enormous for Tua. I mean, you had this one, you have the matchup with Justin Herbert, and the AFC, team that's competing for a playoff spot, and then you have the Buffalo Bills. So I think this is a situation where he had to play better. He didn't, and it's disappointing. But I'll give him credit because after the game, one thing about him, he stands up and he takes accountability. He came right out and said it. I did not play well. It's on me. And so let's see what happens moving forward.
Good sign of a leader, but also good sign for him taking advantage of some pretty easy matchups prior to this game against San Francisco. So the stretch of games that he had, Heath, Pittsburgh, 17 fantasy points. That was coming back from the concussion. Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, 29 or more points. Houston, we know he left the game because they had a big lead, only 17 points. 295 and 2 is a good number.
Right.
The 2 interceptions, the fumble, the 3 sacks. I think he's going to be a little bit of trouble. Not necessarily this week because the Chargers stink, but if he doesn't get his tackles back.
Yeah, I think he is, and they can't protect him. I think it does show you also the weapons he has and the system he has, that to have a day like this, we're talking about how bad he struggled, and it's really the 3 turnovers are the reason that he wasn't a good fantasy quarterback. 295 and 2, that's a good fantasy day for a starting quarterback. He just had the turnovers, and he's going to have turnovers with this offensive line like this.
Just the first time that he's thrown an interception really since Week 4 when he played another good defense, which was the Bengals, and we know he was still dealing with the concussion situation then. All right, the other big quarterback injury from Week 13 was Lamar Jackson hurting his knee, and according to John Harbaugh, it's going to be days to weeks that he's dealing with this knee injury. So, Pete, this is what Harbaugh said. We'll see if he can go back this week. If not, he'll be back sometime after that shortly. Now, we know Lamar's not been playing well. How bad is this team going to be in trouble, the Ravens, if it is Tyler Huntley stepping in for Lamar Jackson?
Well, he stepped in and did some good things. I mean, look, they had 27 yards, 27 yards, I think, in the first quarter, or 17 when he went out. 17 yards when Lamar Jackson went out. The week before, he wasn't very good. The week before that, he was just average. So he's thrown 1 touchdown pass, I think, in the last 2+ games. So it's not like he was lighting things up. And Huntley came in, struggled for a while, but then he got it going. He made a drive late in the game. He didn't drive the ball down the field as you can see by the numbers, 27 completions for 187 yards. But I think he can handle things in the short term. But still not the same as not having Lamar Jackson. We've seen that in the past.
We saw last year, Heath, that Huntley had a very big game against the Packers, 39 fantasy points. Kind of struggled the rest of the way, but there's always that hope because of the rushing production. And 17 fantasy points stepping in for Lamar Jackson. As we saw the numbers, they also had the 10 carries, 41 yards, and the touchdown, Pete alluding to the passing yards. Against Pittsburgh this week, and I guess moving forward, how much are you going to be interested in Tyler Huntley?
Well, in a 2-quarterback league, I'd rather start Tyler Huntley than Brock Purdy. So I think a low-end number 2 starter. This is a terrible situation around him. I mean, as bad as Lamar Jackson's been, they've still been scoring 20 points most games. You saw here, they just struggled to get to 10. So I do think the offense will be a struggle. Mark Andrews is the only guy that's going to be a starter for me in this offense.
What about Dobbins, though, if he does return?
If Dobbins returns and shows us something, then I think that you can get on board because, I mean, obviously it's not going to be Gus Edwards taking the job from him.
Yeah, well, Gus struggled, Drake struggled. And the one thing last year that Tyler Huntley did great was make Mark Andrews an absolute star. So not that he's not a star already, but just took him to a different heights where we were talking about maybe him being better than Travis Kelce this season. So there's something to keep an eye on there as they face Pittsburgh in Week 14. But again, Lamar Jackson's not even ruled out yet for that. So just something to keep in mind there. The Seattle backfield could be a little bit in trouble potentially as Kenneth Walker left the game against the Rams with an ankle injury, and Pete Carroll saying this: I can't tell you because it's not an ankle sprained, it's jammed inside, so I'm not quite sure what to tell you right now. Now he's going for testing on Monday. Today is Kenneth Walker. DJ Dallas stepped in at first, and he also hurt his ankle. Travis Homer was out with an illness. Tony Jones, are you ready for this? He played the entire second half without his contacts, and he can't drive with them according to the Tacoma News. So he was technically playing blind in the game against the Rams. That's how bad it was for them. They were almost ready to call Marshawn Lynch to come rescue them. So, Pete, when you look at this backfield, obviously Kenneth Walker has been a superstar. How much do they lose if he's not there?
Oh, they lose a guy who's a lead back. I mean, clearly he's been one of those rookies that stepped in and immediately made an impact, and they lose that. I mean, that's a big hit for them. But they're a passing team now, Jamie. They've morphed into a passing team. Geno Smith has been outstanding. Those two receivers were outstanding on Sunday, and so, yeah, it hurts not having Kenneth Walker, but Pete Carroll won't admit it. But that's a passing team in Seattle now with Geno Smith.
All right, well, they still want to run the ball. And so for fantasy managers, who are they looking to pick up? Is it going to be Dallas? Is it going to be Homer? Is it going to be Tony Jones with his contacts?
I think it's probably going to be DJ Dallas if he's okay. Homer will be the passing downs back, but I just don't think there's a situation where he's seeing double-digit carries on a consistent basis. So DJ Dallas would be my bet. If they say DJ Dallas is going to be out as well, it's going to be Tony Jones, but I don't have that much interest in Tony Jones.
Yeah, as we continue to go down the sliding scale, remember, this was supposed to be Walker as the second guy because Rashad Penny was initially the starter, so they are really strapping the bottom of the barrel here for their depth chart. So hopefully one of these guys can step up. DJ Dallas, again, probably the most likely. I agree with you there on Heath. I agree with you, Heath, on that one there. In terms of the Broncos, Pete, we saw Cortland Sutton leave the game. Jerry Jeudy came back after missing 2 games with an ankle injury. He had 4 catches, 65 yards on 4 targets. Greg Dulcich was actually pretty good, 6 catches, 85 yards on 8 targets. Is this just a lost season for almost everybody there in Denver because of how bad Russell Wilson's played?
Yes, and because of how bad the offensive line plays and has played all year long. It's a hard watching that offense, and it's even uglier when you put the all-22 on because that's a bad quarterback right now. He was a little bit better on Sunday. I mean, progress for him is something, I guess, considering he was disaster for most of this season. But they have a bad offensive system, a bad offensive line, and the quarterback's playing poor. So when you look at it, you can't count on any of those guys.
Going back to Jeudy or Dulcich going into Week 14 against the Chiefs as potential starters?
Absolutely. If Cortland Sutton's out, then Jerry Jeudy will be a high-end number 3, maybe even a borderline number 2 wide receiver, and Dulcich is probably right back at that number 12 range. Now, he might be a complete disappointment, but that's what everybody in that range is. It's just 1 week on, 1 week off.
I do find it interesting that you like the Broncos situation for Jeudy better than the 49ers situation for Purdy, because you could probably make a case that Purdy is better than Russell Wilson at this point, and those receivers in San Francisco are probably better, but there's additional mouths to feed. I get where you're going there. The Titans lost Treylon Burks in the game. Again, just a fantastic catch, scoring a touchdown on the 25-yard reception, but getting knocked out. If you remember Jerry Maguire, it was like the Rod Tidwell play at the end of the movie there, but unfortunate situation, so hopefully Treylon Burks is going to be okay. Pete, just your assessment of the Titans offense. Derrick Henry was awful. 11 carries, 30 yards, 2 catches, 8 yards on 3 targets. Is he in trouble because teams just know that they can't throw the ball and this offensive line is not the same that it's been the last couple of years?
The offensive line was awful on Sunday, and I have watched that tape. Boy, they were bad across the board. And they're not a big offensive line, particularly on the interior, and they got pushed around, made it hard for him to run. And the quarterback took a beat. Ryan Tannehill took a beating on Sunday. There were 9 hits on him, 9, and they had 6 sacks. So they brutalized him because the offensive line was bad. You can't run. We know how he has to run. Derrick Henry's one of those guys that has to have lanes and the ability to get going. If he doesn't get going, he's not a great runner that can put his foot in the ground and change direction. So it's bad right now for that offensive line. It's bad for that offense. But here come the Jaguars and that awful defense. That's a cure-all for anybody.
Are you concerned about Henry?
I'm a little bit concerned, yeah. I mean, it's been 4 bad games in a row, and it's not exactly been against good run defenses. So, I think there's reason to be concerned, especially at this stage of his career and with the way the offensive line is playing.
So if you have Derrick Henry, obviously trade deadlines are passed. Do you feel like you got a championship-winning fantasy option, or crossing your fingers and kind of looking with one finger.
Crossing my fingers and hoping the Chargers and Texans are bad enough that it doesn't matter.
All right, so hopefully that'll be the case as we get to the fantasy playoffs. One other injury note, Hayden Hurst, tight end for the Bengals, didn't finish the game against the Chiefs. We'll hopefully see he's okay against the Browns in Week 14.